back, AdventureBlur here. I've talked a lot on the channel before about some of the many Easter eggs and references to things in games, particularly Animal Crossing. But one thing I haven't delved into much, if at all, is all the references and nods to Japanese mythology in the series. Being made by Nintendo, a Japanese company that loves referencing folktales and stories, it isn't surprising that Animal Crossing has a lot of nods to these stories, especially in the form of special characters. So today I'm going to go over some of the many yokai and Japanese legends referenced in Animal Crossing in the form of special characters. So let's not waste any more time and let's get started. First we have Cap'n and his family and their relationship with Kappas. This one might be the most iconic and well known outside of Tom Nook and Crazy Red, just because of how many nods to Japanese mythology is there. In Japanese mythology, Kappas are water demons that lurk in lakes and rivers. They're humanoid-like creatures with scales, a beak for a mouth, and a large turtle shell on their back. They also have an indent on the top of their head where they store water for some reason. Kappas seem to be obsessed with pranks, and most of them are actually pretty cruel and messed up. They are, however, incredibly obsessed with politeness as well, and tradition, to the point where people would supposedly bow to them just so they could bow back and lose all the water in their bowl on their head. This would embarrass and confuse the Kappa, and the person could walk away unscathed. They also have a major obsession with cucumbers and consider those to be their favorite food. 'Cause why not? Cap'n's nods to the Kappa are pretty obvious. I mean, look at his name. Kappa, Cap'n, pretty spot on. And he looks just like one, even having the indent on the top of his head. Cap'n is almost always found near water, except for in Wild World and City Folk, where he drives a taxi and bus. And he sings about cucumbers all the time. Cap'n and his family are also, overall, very nice and polite to the player, and are never rude in any of the games. It also helps that Cap'n is actually a Kappa in the Japanese versions of Animal Crossing. Overall, Cap'n and his family are really good nods to the Kappa, and are much nicer than the myths they're based on. Next up is Crazy Red and the Kitsune. I've already touched on the Kitsune previously in a separate video all about Crazy Red. So to put it simply, the Kitsune is known to be a trickster spirit that scams and steals from people, and also have quite the rivalry with Tanukis. Of course, Red fits all of that, and his rivalry with Nook is pretty well known. In fact, just like Cap'n, Red isn't just inspired by a Kitsune, he is one in the Japanese version of the games. This was changed to a fox in the international versions of them, but it's still pretty amazing. While we're on the subject of Red, let's talk about Tom, Timmy, and Tommy Nook and how, in Japan, they're Tanukis. The Tanuki is a spirit similar to the Kitsune, in that they're known for playing pranks on people. But, where Kitsune can occasionally hurt people with their pranks and practical jokes, Tanukis are much more tame about it. According to Japanese mythology, the Tanukis are overall kinder and much more trustworthy, while the Kitsune are sneakier and much more dangerous. It's also said that Kitsune are technically more magically powerful than Tanuki, but the Tanuki are better at transformations. Supposedly, the Tanuki can transform things into gold or whatever they want by using a leaf on its head. You see, the reason furniture and items are shown as leaves in the game wasn't just some sort of weird but convenient way of moving furniture. It was also a nod to the Japanese mythology that inspired the game and its shopkeepers. It's also cool to note the fact that Kitsune are more powerful than Tanukis, but less trustworthy. You kind of see this in the games, after all. Red sells rare items like paintings that Tom Nook doesn't, but Nook's prices are much fairer, and Red is also known for faking these items, which Tom Nook never does. Just something to note. Then we have Blanca and how she is heavily inspired by the yokai Naporabo. In Japanese mythology, the Naporabo is a spirit that looks just like a normal person, but with one difference. No face. Really, I mean it, no face. The Naporabo will trick unsuspecting people into thinking it's a beautiful man or woman. Then when the person gets close, it will wipe away its fake eyes, nose, and mouth to reveal a completely blank face. It seems to only do this to prank people, and overall they aren't too terrible or malicious compared to other yokai. As you can see, Blanca is very inspired by the Naporabo. She appears to look like a normal villager, just without face. She has you draw one on, similar to how the Napura bow has to draw one onto itself, and she loves to prank people. Another interesting fact about this is that the Napura bow is heavily related to the kitsune and tanuki in Japanese mythology. And just like what we went over earlier, the kitsune and tanuki are already represented in Animal Crossing. Then there's Luna and her nod to the tapir-esque yokai called Baku. Bakus are tapir-like creatures that guard people's dreams and eat away any bad dreams they come across. This one's pretty self-explained. Luna allows players to explore different dream islands and towns in Animal Crossing, leading to good dreams. Unless, of course, you go to one of those towns. You know the ones. And finally, probably the creepiest one on the list, Gyroids and their connection to Haniwas. Unlike most of the others on the list, where there are nods to mythology and folktales, Gyroids and Haniwas are actually based on real-life events. During the Kofun and Asuka periods of history in Japan, many families would bury these terracotta sculptures in tombs. These sculptures, ranging from animals to people, were called Haniwas, and their design is almost identical to the gyroids we see in Animal Crossing. Let's also not forget that the only way of getting gyroids in the older Animal Crossing games prior to New Horizons was to dig them up from the ground, and that the only mainline game where you can get gyroids is in New Horizons, which takes place on a deserted island. Well, dang. This got dark. And that'll do it. Those are some of the many nods to Japanese mythology and history found in Animal Crossing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about all of these surprising Japanese influences on these iconic characters. One thing I do want to say is that, though these are interesting, I wouldn't let it change your experiences with the series unless if you wanted to. Yeah, some of these are dark, and in some cases the characters are meant to be one of these creatures. But in the end, characters like Tom Nook and Cap'n should be seen as Tom Nook and Cap'n, and not just a Tanuki or Kappa, even though the influences and nods are there. I just don't want anyone to get any ideas with any of those crazy fan theories that go around the internet. But anyways, if you enjoyed it, please like, comment which fact was your favorite, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And, as always, this is AdventureBlur, and I will see you next time.